Ladies and gentlemen, may we please rise as we welcome our Vice Chancellor and Principal, Prof. Dinyiko Maluleke, and our author, Prof. Malegapuru Makgoba. Round of applause, please. Maybe I'm a bit deaf, but that is not loud enough. A round of applause, please.
Okay, I'm fine.
Thank you so much. You may be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Di macheroni, absheni, dumelang, sanbonan bagit. Goeiemorgen. More. Welcome to the Tshwane University of Technology. Welcome to the VC's Book of the Month event. My name is Papama Chisikawe, and yet again I'm honored to be part of this event, to be directing the program. Thank you so much for availing yourselves and gracing us with your presence. Without any waste of time, as we welcome you to another VC's Book of the Month, where our Vice Chancellor, Prof. Dinyiko Maluleke, will dig deep into discussions with Prof. Malegapuru Makgoba about his book titled Leadership for Transformation Since the Dawn of South Africa's Democracy, an Insider's View. I'd like now to invite Prof. Dinyiko Maluleke to introduce to you the author, Prof. Malegapuru Makgoba. A round of applause, please.
I probably should just stay seated. Prof, you don't have to jump this.
No, don't worry.
But I'll stand here. Good morning. You all look very intelligent and very well read. I hope that appearances are not deceptive this time. Prof. Makgoba, what an honor and a pleasure to welcome you to the Tshwane University of Technology, a university whose formation 19 years ago you had a hand in. I'm sure that it will be satisfying for you as a former member of the National Working Group to see the fruit of some of your efforts. You are most welcome, and I know that you come with an entourage of people, some of whom I will mention, but I don't have the whole list in front of me. Let me start with just talking a little bit, Prof, about the rationale or the philosophy of the VC's Book of the Month. The VC's Book of the Month is an idea which came to me because upon my return from the USA, where I did my master's in Chicago, I landed my first academic job, which was actually a part-time job at UNISA. I think I worked for 3 days a week. My office at UNISA was a cubicle on the 8th floor of the library. And I stayed working in that cubicle for a few more years because I completed my PhD from that cubicle, surrounded by books. And so I never left the library ever since. A few years ago, I was made a judge for the Sunday Times Book Prize, arguably the biggest book prize in the country. And I served on that panel 3 times. They called me a 4th time, where we read at least 25 books newly published and chose the one we thought was a winner. I was involved in the nonfiction, the so-called Alan Paton Book Prize. And so this VC's Book of the Month is really a continuation of these activities in which I have been involved in recent years. It is a platform for our students and staff to meet and engage with authors and writers who have distinguished themselves in their chosen fields. Such high caliber thinkers and leaders do not come more accomplished and more proven than Professor Malegapuru Makgoba. The VC's Book of the Month is carefully chosen and even more carefully read by the Vice-Chancellor in order to produce the highest quality of discussion on it. Tate Mutluatse will tell you how much I was knocking at his door and saying, I need my copy because I need to read it. I don't want the day to arrive before I have read the book. So that's the rationale, and I want to acknowledge your partner, advocate, who is here in our midst. I was looking at her and saying, I know you from somewhere, and then she confirmed that she is here to support you, and we are honored that she has joined you. I also met your younger brother, who looks like a photocopy of you in some ways. You look, I can see the resemblance, and other members of your entourage who you have come with. I'll introduce you slightly more properly in a few minutes, Prof. Makgoba. Just a few lines from the beginning of this book. I think it is in the preface. One will find the following words which you can't but be struck by, and I quote, "In 29 years, my country went from a society of hope to a nation of shame, unhappiness, anger, and at times despair. On everyone's lips are questions about how we arrived where we are today, this current mess and morass. Many South Africans are, to put it bluntly, heartful, in despair, angry, and disillusioned about the current leadership and the trajectory the country is taking." End of quote. The 293 pages long book of Prof. Makgoba, Leadership for Transformation Since the Dawn of Democracy, an Insider's View, will hit the reader like a storm. Built upon a spirited preface and an engaging introduction, the 9 chapters of the memoir explode one after the other like the spirals of energy that drive a hurricane forward. Above all, this is a book about the elephant in the room. It starts with the elephant in the room, stays with the elephant in the room, and ends with the elephant in the room, namely the problem of leadership, or lack thereof. To quote the author, this book is about leadership for transformation, or leadership during transformation. And it is also a book, and I quote again, written out of love and care for my country, its future, and my compatriots. He uses Meredith Belbin's steamroll theory throughout the book as an analytical tool. He also outlines very clearly what good transformational leadership looks like, both by personal example and by explanation. This is not a book about abstract notions of leadership and theories thereof. Instead, it contains the reflections of one of the most influential leaders, a prominent thought leader and a public intellectual in democratic South Africa. He takes full advantage of his global experiences and includes in his reflections various global leaders who are influential in the world, including those in the artistic, sporting, and scholarly domains. He particularly focuses on the diverse leadership roles over the 29 years since he returned from South Africa in August 1994, after spending 15 years abroad. Professor Makgoba observes that while he was elated to return home, initially to take up the role of Deputy Vice-Chancellor at WITS, he also realized that he was, and I quote, transitioning from a contented and successful position of scholarly accomplishment abroad into what he calls a challenging, unknown territory and an unknown future. We're going to hear a little bit more about that unknown territory and the future that was once unknown. In the process of his reflections, Prof. Makgoba evaluates the leadership performance of 4 South African presidents with whom and under whom he worked, their leadership teams, cabinets, and the 25 or so ministers under and with whom he worked. He does not mince his words about the inanity and the redundancy of what he calls the bureaucratic layer called deputy ministers. We will talk more about that. So the first 4 chapters, or rather the second, third, fourth, and fifth chapters are dedicated to a piercing, if also balanced, evaluation of the leadership performance of our presidents, Mbeki, Mandela, Zuma, and Ramaphosa. To each president, he gives credit when it is due, but he also lifts up their blind spots. The 6th chapter of the book is dedicated to the 26 cabinet ministers under and with whom Prof. Makgoba served in one or the other capacities, and I won't go into the details of that. And then in chapter 7, he focuses on AIDS denialism, one of the most painful periods in the history of this country since democracy. He seems to conclude that President Mandela and President Mbeki had the clearest of vision of what to do to transform the country, and I'm quoting him. Since their departure, the country has drifted into a mess of confusion. The quality and competence of cabinet has deteriorated to the extent that we are now rock bottom on our knees, end of quote. Who is Professor Malegapuru Makgoba? If you don't know him, I wouldn't be able to believe that you are South African. Professor Makgoba was born in the village of Skoonwoord, Gaskukun. He is the eldest son of Muriti and Magwadi Makgoba. He attended Magane Primary School and went on to matriculate at Kwiti High School, obtaining a first-class pass. He received his MBCHB degree from the University of Natal Medical School in 1976 with merit in medicine. In 1979, he was named the first African Nuffield Dominion Fellow to the University of Oxford, where he completed his DPhil degree in human immunogenetics in 1983 under Professor Sir Andrew McMichael. The title of his thesis was Studies on the Polymorphism of HLA class II antigens. If you don't understand that, you are not alone. He obtained one of the first HLA-DA beta sequences and many, many other research and academic distinctions. Professor Makgoba was appointed the first black deputy vice-chancellor at the University of Witwatersrand in 1995. I remember that so vividly. Professor Makgoba left Wits University to join the South African Medical Research Council. He was appointed the first African chairperson of the MRC board from 1995 to 1998, a board which was until then a very white male Afrikaner. He thereafter served as the first African president of the South African Medical Research Council between 1999 and the year 2002, the years of storm and denialism. Professor Makgoba joined the former University of Natal as its vice chancellor and principal in 2002, and he oversaw its merger and transformation with the University of Durban-Westville and created the now known University of KwaZulu-Natal. He was the founding vice chancellor and principal of that university. Today, that university is one of the top 5 research-intensive universities in this country, and it is ranked among the top 500 universities in the world, thanks to his work. He was also appointed the founding health ombud, whom we will remember for especially the report on the Life Esidimeni tragedy. His book now is not the first. He wrote a book a few years back, which many of us grew up on and really enjoyed reading, the Makgoba Affair, a reflection on transformation, which was published in 1997. And the Makgoba Affair is, of course, that episode, that jarring episode that he went through, adverts very, very racialized episode, if I may add. Professor Makgoba is married to legendary actor and author and model advocate Nakedi Ribani, whom I want to acknowledge in our midst. He has been a member of the National Working Group that created, among others, this university. He has received the Golden Jubilee Award of the Colleges of Medicine in South Africa. He was appointed chair of the Ministerial Oversight Committee on Transformation in South African public universities, to the chagrin of some who didn't quite like that he was given that responsibility, a responsibility he embraced. Professor Makgoba was also appointed a member of the National Planning Commission of the Republic of South Africa, which he went on to become deputy chair of. He was bestowed the highest honor by President Jacob Zuma with the National Order of Mapungubwe Silver for his dedication and excellent contribution to the field of science and medicine. The same President Jacob Zuma, who he later describes in his book as having possibly laid the foundations for a mafia state in South Africa. Let me stop there, because there are so many other accolades I could read about that relate to Prof. Makgoba. Prof, we really are honored that you are here to talk about your book. You can talk while you are seated there, because you have this, and you don't have to come here, and I'll come and sit next to you. Over to you.
Thank you, Tinyiko. The audience that is here to come and engage, I think, on this book. First of all, I just have to acknowledge that there are people online, I suppose, participating in these discussions, the Vice Chancellor's book choice. I've got some of my friends and colleagues that I grew up with, but importantly, I have my wife here. I've got my 2 younger brothers here. As you say, you have met some of them and some colleagues that I grew up with. Thank you for inviting me to come to this university. You know, in 2001, when we were tasked by the late Kada Asmal to deal with the transformation of universities, people did not realize that the mergers and incorporations were the first translation of a theoretical concept of wanting to transform to actually putting into action a process that would change the universities in South Africa. Remembering that we had about 37 universities, all with different histories, backgrounds, capacities, and various racial identities. And in order to try and break down the racial identities of these universities, the only choice we had was to merge and incorporate so that we can break down the racial makeup of the university. That was really the simple concept, but we needed to do it obviously against the tide of the time, that even people who used to call universities bush universities, when we wanted them to be incorporated, they felt that we were threatening their turfs and not really wanting to bring meaningful change. I'm very happy that I'm visiting one of these universities that was created out of that decision. And I can also proudly say that to you, that when we were dealing with the issue of the merger as to which university or which technicon must go to which, that was done in my office in Cape Town at the Medical Research Council. And we sat there with a map and said, you decide how these measures should take place. But that's the details of what happens when you are involved in a project. The audience, just like people who are being fed food, they don't know what came out of the kitchen, but they are just enjoying the food that is on the table. When you are in the kitchen, you know whether you are cutting an onion or you are bringing a rat into the meat mixture or whatever it is that you want to bring. But nevertheless, that's what happens when you work in the kitchen and when you do a project to the conclusion. Again, I want to congratulate you for taking the leadership of this institution to where it is today. We have met in various other capacities. I know that you have also replaced me as the Deputy Chair of the National Planning Commission, which is a very important commission. And as you know, I had served my term there of 10 years, and as it is consistent in South Africa, when you've done your 10 years, it's time to move away and give other people an opportunity to do so. But I will say something about the National Planning Commission because I read yesterday that its recommendations are dead and buried, and I think we need to understand why that might be so. The main reason I'm here really is to share with you something that has troubled me over the past 29 years. I left South Africa on the 5th of October, 1979. And the reason why I remember that was that my mother remembered it. And she always remembered that I had left on that date and reminded me all the time that, remember, you left us on the 5th of October. It's not that I've got a good memory, but she always reminded me of that. I returned in August. I can't remember the date because my mother didn't really bother to remember it. So I know that I came back in August. So when I was thinking about this 29 years and when this book might be released, I think Mr. Mutobi, who is the publisher, obviously had to bear that in mind, that it had to be 29 years of my departure, of my return to South Africa. And I thought it was useful to reflect on this period, 29 years, from a number of perspectives, but more importantly because I'm trained in biology, and I often say that in a period of between 25 years to 30 years, it's called a generation. That's the definition of a generation biologically. And in that period, you have parents, that give birth to children, and those children begin to give birth to other children. That's what it's a genetic or a biological generation. And you can imagine in the lifespan of a human being, when you are an adult, you have your own children, and your own children begin to have their own children, there has to be a change in life. Because you grew up in another world in the same area, but the world has changed almost a lot. And it has even changed a lot because we now have the internet, we now have all kinds of developments that have occurred, and you have to ask yourself, how do you reflect over the 30 years of your life? So that was really what occupied me. 29 years, we have had democracy. What does it look like? Who have been the most important decision makers in this democracy? What have they done? What did they look like? What did they do? What were the things that excited them? And what did I know about them that other people didn't know, that I had to deal with when I was interacting with them, such that I could make some meaningful assessment of their ability to make decisions. And what are the other people that I worked with when all of us were enjoying the new democracy in South Africa with all that it brought. Now, I will start by stating the obvious. The South Africa of post-1994 is very different from the South Africa before. It is a much better South Africa than the one before. I think we must accept that. We mustn't confuse and start yearning for the past. That was very terrible for some of us who grew up in that. I think the question that I had to ask was, having inherited this pariah state in 1994, with all its potential, what have we done as South Africans, and more importantly, as the leaders in South Africa? Have we done something that is excellent? Have we done something that is not so excellent? Or have we failed the people that we were supposed to take to somewhere else? You know, we were supposed to take people to heaven. Where are they? I'm sure they are hovering between heaven and hell, and some of them are confused and don't know where to go. But nevertheless, that's the nature of what we have. So this story that I've written in this book covers this 29 years. And it covers it because it took me 23 years to put this book together. And I didn't write it sort of like Angelo Agrisi, who had a notebook and had videotapes of people. I didn't have the benefit of that, and maybe there were no videotapes at my time when I started writing the book. But nevertheless, it has taken me 23 years to put it together and to end it at the end of what I call a biological generation. So because I've written the book, and I can sometimes improve on what I've written, I'm going to do a little bit of reading, which is something I don't like very much, but unfortunately, I don't want to misquote myself. That would be a dangerous thing to do. So the book that I have the privilege to discuss with you today is a personal journey of experiences, of observations, and as two of the people who read the book describe it, they describe it as an odyssey. And these reflections are captured in these 294 pages of the book. It covers a 29-year period of South Africa's democracy, and the period corresponds to my return in August 1994. One thing I had to do was I did not want to shade the truth nor sanitize the truth. There's no sanitization of the truth. I mean, last weekend, I think we were burying Buthelezi, and I'm sure most of you who read newspapers would see that there is controversies about how his legacy is being sanitized and controversial, because I think nobody wants to speak the truth. So I tried, I think, in writing this book, especially about people who have sacrificed themselves in one way or another to keep the good things that they have done, but also to highlight that they were at times, they behaved like rogues, and you couldn't understand why. On the one hand, they would sacrifice their life for the liberation of people, and then immediately after that, they sacrifice another life to steal what the people should have. So that's really the balance that one had to take about each of these characters. I started the book by quoting somebody that I worked with at the Mail and Guardian when I was the chairperson of the board. This was Mr. Peter Wundler. For those of you who don't know him, he was the founder member of a group called Head Boys, an advertising group in South Africa. I think his younger brother writes movies, Generation or something, I don't know what you call them, movies or soapies, but it's from that family. Now, Peter wrote last year in City Press, and I want to quote him in full because I share most of what he says. He says, "Today we have a broken country. The education system is a total mess. The economy is teetering with unemployment rife. The healthcare system is approaching collapse. These are the sine qua non of a failed state. Our infrastructure, our roads, our bridges, and our railways are almost beyond use. As you know, you've heard about Transnet. Crime is rampant to the point that South Africa is approaching a lawlessness state, such as would be the envy of Mexico and Colombia. That's how lawlessness is in South Africa. Men have declared war on women and children." And he says, "We must hand it to the ANC. It has mastered corruption to the extent that sometimes one wonders who is not corrupt in the ANC. We certainly need help," close quotation. That's Peter Wundler writing in City Press. I relied on the powers of observation, research, investigations, and honesty to the truth in humanizing my story. I did not interview any of the characters that I describe in the book. I observed them and made conclusions about them, realizing that quite often I may be wrong, but more often I would be right. Because in my career, I've spent my life dealing with human beings all the time and having to make judgments also about their lives and the important things that matter to them. The story of this book can be summarized in 3 words: leadership, transformation, and cabinets or teams. Leadership is the theme because leadership is one of the things that decides on the fortunes of people, of individuals, and of societies. When we took over in 1994, all of us wanted to live in a country that gave us all opportunities, that had equality and equity, that was non-racial, that was non-sexist. And that was in 1994. When you look at it today, are we non-racial? Are we non-sexist? You just have to look at the bare facts. You look at the 10 members of the NEC today, all of them are Africans, all of them are males. Is that what the ANC stood for? Non-racism? When you have the top 10 of your NEC belonging just to one group, the very same group that was oppressed, the very same group that was fighting so that we can have equality, is that what we wanted to achieve in 29 years? So these are the questions that I think are beginning to back all of us as we do. The word leadership appears about 434 times in the book. The word transformation appears 332 times in the book. And the word cabinet appears 287 times in the book. I just did a sort of a rough count to see what are the most frequent words that appear in the book, so that when I say these are the themes of the book: cabinets, leadership, transformation. Transformation has been important for me because when I left the UK, the only word that I knew, or that I didn't know before I left, when I left South Africa, the word transformation was not in my head. I was just a medical scientist. I wanted to do a PhD. And when I was coming back, this word transformation came to me. And it came to me starkly when I was doing my interview at WITS. I started to hear this word transformation. And I said, what animal is this? And the night before I flew back to the UK, I had a group of students from this movement called SASCO, and from Nehau. It was the president of Nehau then, Sipho Nklapo, and Dan Mutaung, and then it was Peniel Mashile and Malegapuru and Sfiso Zulu, who's now a teacher in KZN. They came to me at the hotel in Braamfontein and said to me, when you come back, you won't be able to do research anymore, because here the battle is about transformation. So I said, what is that? They said, well, we want to change the universities so that we can see people who look like us. We can have mentors that look like us, not mentors that come from another planet or another country. So they said to me, if you are coming back, you must then assist us when you are on the 11th floor, because that's where the administration is at the adverts. You must assist us so that we can accelerate this process. So I immediately realized that as much as I wanted to do medical research, which is my passion, when I come back into South Africa, my whole career was going to change immediately, as Tinyiko mentioned. Because where I was, I was just concerned about myself, about my well-being, about the success of my research and my team. I didn't worry about British society, what it was happening, because British people were taking care of their society. But now I'm coming here to have to worry about the challenges of what students and the workers are wanting to do in a different society, but a society that also brought me up. So that's why transformation became a very important theme of my career change and life over the past 29 years since I've been back. So I had to ask myself, how do I base my understanding of how society works, how leadership works, and how do people lead? Because I was given this portfolio adverse to become the Deputy Vice Chancellor. And one of the things that I also, just on a lighter note, was that when I got so absorbed in the transformation and we were driving it hard, you know, the people who came to me and say, "Utshwenya Makgoba," were African people and African students. Say, don't be hard on them. Usko ba tshwenya, because when you worry them, they come and punish us. They can see that something is happening and their privileges are no longer going to be the same. Just slow down a little bit. I think in Zulu say, kancane kancane, something like. So there are these dynamics that you have to manage in that position you want to be part of them, but at the same time understand how they want the pace to be. And of course, it reminded me also of my own father's generation. They saw us as radicals when we were in SASO, because they had a different way in which the country must change, but we were impatient a little bit, and of course, the generation of the 76 was even more impatient than us. So there is a generation that brings changes that are different from what we're used to. So I found this interesting book or studies by a Cambridge academic called Meredith Belbin. Meredith Belbin took interest in studying teams and how teams work, function, and how they survive, succeed, or fail. And I say this because it's not only a theoretical approach to team management. It is something that I actually practiced from the time when I arrived here, when I went to the MRC, when I went to UKZN, and when I became the health ombud. I understood very clearly that when people are in a team, they behave in particular ways. And I often say, if you take a group of geniuses and put them together as a team, very soon some of the geniuses will become clowns, no longer geniuses. They will display behavior that is different from what you thought you brought them for. Because in a team of people, there's got to be people who can sing, there's got to be people who can recite poets, and there has got to be clowns to keep a team going and working. And it doesn't matter how you construct it. So Meredith Belbin came out with 3 kind of dominant behaviors. And he called this the social dominant behavior. And he had another one which was sort of like the action-orientated behaviors. And then he had the other one which was the thinking behavior. That if you group any team, you will find that there are thinkers, and there are obviously people who want to do things and action-orientated. And there are those that want to bring things together. Now just sit here and reflect. We've had President Mandela, we've had President Mbeki, we've had President Zuma, and we've had President Ramaphosa. I didn't say much about Motlanthe because really he was just a holding president for a little while. But you think about it, what was Tata's message when he became president? He wanted to coordinate the country and reconcile the country. So he was a coordinator. He brought people together. He wanted everybody to be included in the process. So that was his dominant behavior in creating a Team South Africa. A coordinator. But he also had other elements too. He came from the royal family. So he had elements of royalty that maybe Zuma and Ramaphosa and Mbeki don't have. They have to compete like politicians. Then you have Mbeki. Mbeki was a business like CEO. He wanted action, and he wanted things to be done because he was clear as to what he wanted to do. So he was an action-orientated leader because he felt that we had negotiated our settlement. Now we must implement our settlement and act on it. Of course, he drove transformation hard, and it may be part of the reason why he was removed, but there may be other things. Then you had Zuma, who was a people's person, but he made the decisions that were always wrong, and they would be often wrong, not always. They were often wrong because they were overturned by the courts. So a nice person, but not making the right decisions for a country at the time. And of course, there are other elements that he had, as I said to someone in the book, that Zuma's middle name is called Gedlehlekisa. Those of you who love music, you remember there's a lady called Roberta Fleck, Killing Me Softly. So you can see the analogy of people. And then we have the last president, Cyril, and I'll talk a little bit about him because I grew up with him somewhere in the northern province. So there are these dominant, as I say, behavioral things that you see in every team. The thinkers, the coordinators, or the social behaviors, and then the action-oriented teams. If you then look at the cabinets, Mandela's cabinet was full of very seasoned people, knowledgeable in their skills, somehow action-orientated. I can think of Asmal in that cabinet. I can think of Nkosazana in that cabinet. All of these people were very implementers of what was decided. Of course, they were able to do that because they were in areas that they knew very well. It's one thing to take an action-oriented person who is a medic and go and put them in foreign affairs and they don't know what to do in foreign affairs. So it's a match of depth of knowledge in an area that you know very well. So we have, of course, constructed cabinets that I think mirror the faces of our democracy. As I say, Mandela's cabinet was just full of very knowledgeable, seasoned people who did what the same thing applied to Mbeki's cabinet. Then you came to Zuma's cabinet, which had everybody. But everybody had to eat at that time, I suppose. And so you had to accommodate a large group of people. And this has been maintained in the current administration. So you then have mediocrity of people who don't know what they're doing being given positions of leadership. And you ask yourself, what are they doing? Who do they account to? And what it is they account about. So we have this kind of problems of a mismatch between the knowledge base of people, the challenges that the country faces, and what can be done about this large cabinet. Just to give you maybe a simpler example. China has got a population of 1.3 or 1.4 billion people, and it has got a cabinet of about, what I would say, about 22 members of cabinet. We have a population of about 60 million. Our cabinet is about 33, 34 people. The only country that has beaten us is Nigeria, which has got 45 recently. India has got 1.3 billion. The cabinet is about 28. And you ask yourself, why do we have these large cabinets? What do they do? What are they achieving? And we are in misery as a country. Now, I wouldn't be fair if I said, in 1740, Britain had a cabinet of only 5 people. 5 people. It was the Prime Minister, the Minister of Finance is called the Exchequer, Minister of Defense because they were running an empire, and Home Affairs because they had to deal with all the immigrants and people from the colonies, and they had either health or education as the 5th one. Now, jokingly, they often said that whilst all of the people, the 4 other ministers knew what they were doing, the person who was the prime minister knew the least. So you became a prime minister to chair because you didn't know, you're not specialized in anything. So you knew the least. But it's actually what Meredith also came up to when he formulated his team structure. He said that the perfect team would have 5 dominant people who can display any of the 9 characters that he had, the behaviors that he had found. So the issue of having sort of like 5 people with multiple kind of behavior was quite reasonable. And they all came to the conclusion that a perfect cabinet for any country would be no more than 21 people. And they made, Parkinson, I think in his own studies, made a statement that any cabinet that is more than 21 people has lost its authority and its wisdom. Now, it's 21, and if you look at many countries in the world, their cabinet numbers are in that region. In our country, in 2019, a study was done, and it recommended that the cabinet of the country should be between 20 and 24 people. So it's not far from there. And this was sent to the highest office in the land. It has yet to be implemented. So it's not that we don't have information. The information is there. The studies have been done. We don't need to repeat anything. So in short, South Africa has got a bureaucracy. It's got an oversized cabinet that cannot be justified in any form, from any studies, from any principles. When a minister goes away on holiday, the deputy minister doesn't become the minister. So you ask yourself, what do these 35 or 36 deputy ministers do? They are just there to eat. And then we complain that we have had state capture, but we have legitimized state capture within the cabinet, because people are there just to eat for themselves. So these are the issues that, as I say, I try to capture in my book. So let me leave the cabinet a little bit and come to the second theme, the transformation project. Where did the transformation project originate from? Since 1910, when the ANC was formed, 1912, the people of African origins went out, sacrificed their lives, wanting to change the country for everyone. They didn't want to change it for themselves. I think there's nowhere in the literature that I've read where Africans said, we want to take over the country for ourselves at the exclusion of everybody. But we wanted the country to reflect who we were in all its dimensions. So that's the first. So people struggled to change the country for everybody. Of course, then you had the 1955 Freedom Charter at Town. It was written in such a way that it was an inclusive document and it accommodated everybody, but it had the foundations of a change. So the Freedom Charter was the next arena. Then when we worked on the constitution of the country, it enjoined us to transform the country. And then in 2012, when we were in the National Planning Commission, we wrote a document called the NDP, which wanted to transform the country along the Constitution, along the Freedom Charter, along the nature of the struggle. So people struggled for transformation of South Africa in a particular direction. And that's why transformation has become a theme of whatever we do in South Africa. And the next thing that I touch upon the book is these themes that are in the book. The first one is the 29 years of an Odyssey. For those of you who read Greek mythology or who read Greek literature, an Odyssey is a journey of adventure. It's an exciting journey that has got successes, it has got failures, but it's full of adventure. Now, the Odyssey is at the moment still read in modern literature. I think it's made of 24 volumes. It was written by Homer. And it talks about the story of Odysseus, who was the king of Ithaca, who took 6 years on a journey of war and took another 20 years to come back. And in the process there, he was thought to be dead, but he had lots of adventure. Now, the journey of our transformation or of our Uhuru is 29 years, longer than the journey of what Odysseus took as part of his journey. Of course, this is the journey that I undertook and I think is captured in the book. And of course, I capture it, I think, in a number of ways in my role at WITS, my role at the MRC, and my role at UKZN, and my role as an ombud. I then just want to touch on a couple of things that I can read as quotations. I then talk about this for president that Tinyoko spoke about. Really, I think all I say about Nelson Mandela is, I think you all know, we all had a song that says, "Hakuna tshwana le yena," nobody's like him. So I think the less said about him, the better in that way. Then we had Mbeki, who I describe as an intellectual leader, in fact, an African intellectual leader, who championed the African Renaissance and African identity and wanted to transform the country as much as he wanted. But he had 3 blind spots. One was HIV/AIDS, the other was Zimbabwe, the other one was he had a tendency to interfere. No president interfered more like him in everything that we do, and there are examples of that captured in the book. Then, as I say, we have President Zuma, who actually established the National Planning Commission. Not only that, but he also reversed HIV denial. He provided free higher education. So when he dies, how are you going to write his legacy? Like Buthelezi, I guess. Complex, not easy to categorize, but nevertheless, a man of the struggle. So that's my description of him. So the development, the NDP as it says now, and as I say, yesterday I read in the Sunday Times that the NDP feels that government is not to be trusted. Of course, we all know that. We all don't trust government today. So in what, you can't trust them with what is happening with crime, you can't trust them with gender-based violence, you can't trust them with anything that they do. Of course, just to reflect on the NPC. The NPC was established almost around, 2010, the first NPC. It was never legislated. Never legislated. So it's appointed by the president to advise the president and the cabinet, but remember that the cabinet is an elected body of the country that runs the country. Now you have another body that provides advice. It has never pretended that it can be the government outside cabinet. When you do that and you are not legislated, you have no legal power, people start to say, but who are these people? So you lack the legal authority to do what you're supposed to do. And secondly, because it's run by part-time good people, committed South Africans, it doesn't have the time and the machinery to implement any of its ideas. It can only be a think tank and an advisory. And I think I remember saying this to Tinyeko when he took over. I said, you know, in my last 5 years, I fought to try and get the NPC to be legislated. If you can spend your time trying to legislate the NPC so that what it advises gets the legal authority that it can do that, I think you will have achieved something. So there are these complications, but that is also a consequence of a state or of a leadership that has failed to understand its role. In fact, I conducted a study when I was in the NPC called the Measurement and Implementation Studies that showed that the reason why the NDP is not being implemented is because the state has no capacity to implement its recommendation. So it's again a leadership problem. Then I come to the last president of our country, Cyril. And I've got just to quote 3 people. It says, you can't run a country by consensus. The reason we elect government is for it to lead after consultation. Business may not be happy with all the decisions, but it will have certainty. Endless consultations won't take us anywhere. That's what Kaskuvadia said in the Times. In the past 5 years, President Ramaphosa has created a whopping 110 commissions, councils, funds, initiatives, programs, summits, task forces, and war rooms. This is according to Professor Ansi van Wyk in City Press. The third quotation says, don't follow the crowd, let the crowd follow you. That was Mrs. Thatcher about leadership. And of course, Winston Churchill says you can have all the elements of leadership. If you are not courageous, you could as well forget being a leader. I think this is what characterizes the current leadership that we have. And it doesn't matter whether it comes from a ruling party or it comes from anywhere. We have a crisis of leadership in our own country. And we have to accept that and admit it as something that we just need to have to deal with. As I indicated, it took me 23 years to write this book. It's got about 130,000 words with about 145 notes or references. I've provided all the links of the correspondences that I have undertaken with various people that I comment about so that you can link them and read the original exchanges. I've got links to what we were discussing with Pahad, with President Mbeki, Mampela, and so forth. All those links are in the book. You can look for them, the original things, not the doctored stuff or something like that. So, and I've revised this book about 36 times since maybe towards the end of last year. Tulima Donsela was kind enough to offer to do the foreword for the book. I want just to quote her, when she succinctly described the book as follows. She's quoting me, but let me just quote it back. The book was motivated by a downward spiral and a crisis in national leadership that characterizes South Africa today and the role politics and the media have played in the project. A country of so much hope in the 1994 Mandela era has fallen like a meteorite, rapidly regressing and being ruined through rudderless leadership. If you understand English, you will understand what the word rudderless is. Almost like rubberless. Corruption, rampant crime, and violence, poor governance, and poor economic growth, all increasing inequality, unemployment, and poverty. Over this period, this author has seen no unity or renewal in the national leadership. I've heard lots of songs at rallies, never-ending apologies, wake-up calls, asking for forgiveness. And I say, even God would run away or simply cry from such requests. If we are not able to heed the wake-up calls, then we must be either comatose or simply incorrigible. We seem to have learned no lessons. Remember when Zimbabwe was going down the drain a couple of years ago? Remember what South Africans used to do? They used to laugh and say, we can't be like these guys. We are worse than them. If we're not worse than them, we're close to where they are. So, are we a mafia or a failed state? This is my last point. And this is where I come to my favorite president, President Gedleyihlekisa. However, by his omissions and commissions, President Zuma may have unintentionally laid the foundations of a mafia state, a criminal state, or a failed state that has many in South Africa twittering. Now, in medicine, we have a saying, when you have signs or observable signs of something, it is there. You don't say to somebody that you can see that they are pregnant and you say, they are a little pregnant. Or somebody who has cancer, you say, they have a touch of cancer. You either have it or you don't have it. When you have the signs of a mafia state, it's already late that you are actually a mafia state. You don't have to wait for it to collapse. Then you say, how do I wake up? So I think that's the position I am taking. Now, I had to look for, what does a mafia state entail? I found a very interesting write-up by a Venezuelan journalist who defined a mafia state as, in a mafia state, high government officials actually become integral players in, if not the leaders of the criminal enterprise. That's what the state capture was about. And if you don't believe it existed, who was driving it, according to the Zondo Commission? Our leaders. And you can interpret. Despite all the elements are listed, I think the findings and recommendations of the state capture report, there appears to be fertile ground for calling our country a mafia state. Enough signs are there. Of course, one of the quotations in this book that I have used is when I was Vice Chancellor at UKZN, after 7 years, I had to write, because lots of white people were crying that, I'm asking too much of them to write papers, to do research. And I said, but why are you here? If you don't want to do research, go and teach at colleges. You can't be here at a university because here we're supposed to generate new knowledge, we're supposed to deal with contested ideas, and in that contestation we think higher and we think better, and we come up with different kind of knowledge systems and knowledge and understanding of the world. So having heard all these cries of these poor light-skinned people, I sat down one night and said, maybe change is never easy. And I wrote an article that appeared in the Mail and Guardian. And I used the title, Change is Never Easy. A couple of weeks after that, that famous son of Limpopo called Julius Malema was faced with a court challenge about kill the Boer and so forth. And the judge in that court case said there can be no change without pain. Or in order to have there's no transformation without pain. And of course, he dismissed the case. Just emphasizing that change is never easy and is never painless. So I then went to one of my sort of predecessor at school, Dr. Mampela, who provided with me a concluding a statement which says, the future we desire is in our hands as citizens to shape. We must liberate ourselves from dependence on abusive public representatives and officials. Of course, when I first came back to South Africa around 1995, I arrived at the Cape Town airport, and I went to the boys' room. And in that boys' room, they had a cartoon of a young man holding his endowment and say, the future is in your hands. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's the story that you have to deal with. And I'm ready to take any of the questions to engage in this text that I have written for all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. What a fascinating journey that you have walked, and you have walked us through in this book. What I love about this book is the way in which you take the reader with you, even in these intimate encounters with ministers and presidents, where you met with them, or where they asked you some extraordinary things, like the article you had to write in your name, but for President Mandela. I found that fascinating. Maybe you will say something about that. And the minister who had a bedroom next to her office, when I was reading that, I thought maybe I should have a bedroom next to my office. And the minister who loves Barry White. I didn't know that ministers listen to that kind of music. So it's a very personal, but also very, very intimate, very passionate book about your experience in leadership. The change of culture at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, the three cultures, or the three ethnic groups, how did you do that? Let me start there before I open to the audience. How did you engineer the change of culture, these three powerful cultures that were jostling for prominence?
Well, Tinyuko, I think, remember that I had studied at the former University of Natal. And I often remember this. You know, I arrived there in 1971. And I make a reference to this. I arrived on the Transnatal train, which arrives in Durban at 9:15 in the morning. And when I was coming out of this train station, there was a mob of Zulu men chasing another person and saying, "Mshaye Khanda." And I mean, first of all, the language, I realized I was in a different environment. "Mshaye Khanda." And they were hitting this man with sticks. And they beat him, almost he fainted. And I realized, you know, this is not a culture I'm used to. I mean, in rural Skukuniland, I hardly ever saw anybody carrying a knobkerrie. I hardly ever saw a mob chasing another person, wanting to beat him like that. But then, you know, it was a rude awakening. Then, over the weekend, I had 3 friends, Dr. Neluheni and the late Charles Mudiba. We went into town, and we went to a street called Grey Street. And every shop in Grey Street was a closing down sale. Closing down. It means you had to buy because the shop is closing. So the prices were structured in such a way that this was closing down. And so I went back. I wrote to my dad and said, "Look, I've never seen a place where so many things are on sale. And, you know, you have to get them. Otherwise, you won't get them because the shop is going to close down." And 40 years after that, I came back as Vice Chancellor. Those shops were still closing down. The same shops, they were still closing down. And you then have to ask yourself, these are, you know, yeah, you have to live there to understand. So you had there. And when I arrived at the University of, when we were merging the university, Durban Westville, I took the decision that the main campus of the university was going to be Durban Westville. That's where the headquarters was going to be. And of course, the people at Natal thought I was a traitor. I was selling them. I was now becoming black rather than being sort of neutral. So when I arrived there, one lady, an African lady, took me and said, "I want you to walk down this corridor." And he showed me all the surnames on the doors. There was either Pile, Govenda, you name it, you know. And he said, "You know, Ntate Makgoba, if you can do us a favor, if you can just change some of this surname to have Smith, Dlamini, and so forth, I think that would be a big change." So even before I went into my office, I knew that there was this dynamism. And of course, the language you heard at Durban Westville was that this is our university, and it's a university of the Indian ethnic group. When you went to Natal, the English-speaking people said, "This is our university. Our parents have invested money here. We brought this university to you." And then you had this 80% of the population of Zulus who did not have a university because their university was supposed to be Zululand. But they were here in Durban, so they couldn't all be traveling to Zululand every morning to go and study. So I had to sit down and ask myself, this is, you call it ethnic, whatever it is, but it's another form of racism that is masquerading here within the university. And we had to deal with it and address it. That, look, the constitution of the country says that we must be equal, we must have enough opportunities, we must be non-racial, and we have to deal with it here at the university. If we can't deal with it at the university, then, you know, God help us. So that is really the approach that I adopted to say, it's not going to happen under my watch that I then come on the basis of the National Working Group that we want to break down racial barriers. And I have clear examples. Zulus are very confident people. They know their identity, whether you like it or not. You can see even when they bury people they wear their mabe shoes. You don't know where they get these animals from. They are just themselves. They don't try to be someone else. But at the university, they always had this failure to identify where they belonged. Because, as I say, the English-speaking people believed that the university was started by their grannies, and Durban Westville belonged to the Indians, so they didn't belong anywhere. And I'm one of them. Of course, I also didn't belong there. You remember when the late Zwelithini said, all foreigners must leave KZN, I also left. But, because virtually I don't come from there. But that was really the essence of I understood the depth of racism in KZN. And I felt that I needed to tackle it as part of the transformation. It's not an easy thing because it's a long journey that you travel. Now, the ministers you talk about, that I refer in my book, the one is Manto Shabalala. She obviously was alcoholic, as you all know, and she had managed to get a bed next to her office where she could just lie down and order some joy juice and be drunk and still be a minister. Everybody knew that, but nobody spoke about it. Everyone, the department knew, the party knew that she spent most of her time not sober, but she was working as an employee of our government and we were paying her. And of course, the person who liked Barry White, obviously, is Nkosazana Zuma. That was a signature.
Was age denialism the most painful part of your odyssey? I mean, you talk about a story where you were summoned to a meeting.
Yeah.
And you were castigated, berated, until you broke down.
Well, when you face such things like that, you have very few friends. There were very few friends at that time. I think the only people who spoke to me, for what it's worth, was Willie Madisha. He was then, I think, president of COSATU. And it was Mark Haywood and Zaki Ahmad. And those were people that I could talk to comfortably, and my other colleague scientists. But yeah, that was, you see, the AIDS thing hurt me because I thought that the president would listen. I could speak to him, but when he said to me, I want you to stand up with me and say, HIV doesn't cause AIDS, that I felt was a little bit too much for me. And then Bahad, the late Bahad, called me and said, the chief is ready to take on the medical and scientific establishment. That's in the book somewhere. And I said, I can't believe that. If his advisors are taking this sort of attitude, it's going to be very difficult to convince the president that something else could be said differently. And of course, we went on debating the issues and with the advisory panels. And of course, he depended a little bit on the fact that some of these denialists, one of them was a member of the National Academy of Science of the US, Dr. Giusberg. But, he didn't realize that Duisberg at that time was cranky. I mean, he wasn't the same intellect that he used to be. So, yeah, it was very hurting. But what was hurting was the level of insults and the level of berating that took place when they invited each one of us individually. I mean, Glenda Gray can tell you her story. Hussein Kuwaidia can tell, Abdul Slim Karim can tell you. Each one of us had our own installment of the punishment in order to change our thoughts that there is nothing called HIV/AIDS. We have created it by the statistics and the tests that we undergo. And even Manto, who initially thought that HIV causes AIDS, because of the pressure of politics, she had to change, because I knew most of her colleagues with whom she had studied in the Soviet Union who were completely surprised, because remember, she worked in Tanzania before she came here. And there, she was just a normal doctor who understood, I think, the relationship between HIV and AIDS. And suddenly, when she was Minister of Health, then she had to prescribe garlic and beetroots and kind of stuff like that. But that's politics for you. But yeah, it was a serious time, and breakdown of relationships, breakdown of trust, and but somebody had to take the responsibility for that. And I was confident that the study that the MRC had done was the study that would stand the test of time, and that study has stood the test of time up to today. Nobody can challenge it, and nobody has found any fault. We still have a problem of HIV/AIDS up to date. But the person who turned it around, it was Jacob Zuma. So
Anyway. Let's open for a few questions from the audience. Do we have a roving mic? Okay. Don't tell me you are scared of asking a question.
Well, students are often the most active people, if I remember well.
Just say who you are and then your question. One question.
Okay. Good day, everyone. I'm Tsepo Mjapelu from TUT Book Club. So my questions are about what is the role of student leadership in transformation, and what's your opinion on the Roots Must Fall movement? Thank you.
Okay, can I have
Maybe
three questions?
We take two?
Yeah, three.
Yeah, we can take three.
I'm a Christian.
Thank you very much. My name is Pogole Maisela. I'm from Office of the Health Ombud. When you look at the politics of the country, I see you explain the different presidents. But now we are seeing the presidents from the ruling party that the president does not finish his term. And you explain in terms of if we can project that maybe Cyril Ramaphosa explaining him, he may not likely to finish his term. We've got another deputy president that is always like on the news for wrong reason. What is your view in terms of the future, in terms of the incoming president, who is a deputy president? Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dire Masenya. My question is not far-fetched from my leadership from there. Mine, it says, looking into elections that are coming next year, per se, if ANC is, if it is to happen, not that it will, if it is to happen, how would you characterize him? Looking into him, do you see future, like you characterized other presidency? With him, what do you see there, sir? Thank you.
Okay, I think the questions are quite relevant. As I indicated part of the reason I came back was because of the student movements. It was SASCO at the time, and HOW, which represented the workers. And I've always kept in touch with them. In fact, I've often referred myself as an honorary member of SASCO, but that's a separate. Now, the Fees Must Fall movement and Roads Must Fall are all part of a journey of trying to transform higher education and the curriculum. That was really our initial engagement with transformation at WITS. We wanted, as I might use the word, decolonized curriculum and then institutions that reflected who we were and where we were trying to go as a society. We didn't want them to become static. We wanted them to evolve. As the country evolves in its transformation, and students have played a very important role in that, and I continue to respect that. I think the issue of us changing presidents all the time, I think is a function of an immature democracy. I mean, remember that Mbeki removed Zuma as deputy president, and Deputy President Zuma, when he became president, he removed Mbeki, and then Deputy President Ramaphosa, when he became president, removed Zuma. And so now you're not sure who's going to remove who. So I think it's part of an immature democracy that I think the ruling party or the national leadership must find a way around it. That's why I'm asking you, if each of these presidents that I've labeled, except Mandela, who is now normal, if they had to die today, what legacy would you write about them? One has the problem of AIDS, the other one has the problem of state capture, the other one has got digital vibes and other vibes. So, what are you going to say about their leadership that has characterized this period? Because this is a very particular period. We are evolving and developing all the time. And hopefully this will look somewhere like in the past, some other time, but maybe not in our lifetime. How are we going to try to contain that? Now, the last question deals with Julius. Now, obviously, in my book, I have said that there is a new force and there should be a new change. And I've said that I've identified about 30 young leaders in the country. I think one of them is Julius. I have described them as rough diamonds, which means I believe that they need to be groomed somewhere. They need to undergo deeper political education. They do have leadership qualities, but I don't think they are ready to take over yet, just like you. So I think from what I've seen with Julius, I think there's no doubt that he has the qualities of a leader. But remember that his upbringing is from an organization that is riddled with corruption. So he comes from a family that has got embedded in corruption. So, these are things that he needs to be groomed around so that he can become a better leader than he is. But he's not the only one. I mean, there are people like Ndlozi and so forth, and a few other people like Musi Maimane. There's a whole range of young people that really could be in leadership position if they are properly groomed, I think, to take over.
Any more? The roving mic must move and not stand in one place. Otherwise, people next to you will be the ones who ask questions. If it's not working, we'll start this side. Yes.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Onale Nangwamani from TUT Book Club. So I would like to ask if you are a young lady who has a passion to pave a way from young ladies, would it be advisable to follow the Constitution? Because you said the knowledge is there. It's not like we don't have any information. So I believe we need to put action, but I would like to hear more from you. Thank you.
My name is Tsepom Tlala from Soshanguve campus. What kind of leadership is required in your view for institutions of higher learning to succeed and produce fire-ready graduates for the country? Because us as students, we are facing accusations of experiencing a leadership crisis with accusation of nepotism, corruption, and more leveled at a number of institutions during past years. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof. My name is Jan Mwekitz. I work in the library. My question, simply put, is as follows. In our African culture, we say we don't speak ill of the dead, but you portray yourself as someone who believes in telling the truth the way it is. If you were today to write an observation about the recently passed on the late Mangosuthu Buthelezi, in just few lines, how would you describe him? Thank you.
Well, let me start with this question because I've actually written about it in my book. Let me put it this way. At one time or another, when Nelson Mandela was president, he felt that Buthelezi at the time was, I think he was in the government of national unity, but he was playing a Zulu card. His constituency is always in KZN. Remember that he was the chief minister of the Bantustan of KZN. Remember that he didn't want to become part of a united South Africa. He wanted a federal South Africa so that he could have a Bantustan or a province that is called KZN. And at the time, that I wanted to actually encourage Buthelezi to come onto the national stage rather than be a provincial, a chief. And he did his homework, and he wanted to talk to Buthelezi, but the movement would not allow Mandela to speak to Buthelezi because of the ANC, whatever, the dysfunction. So he sent Zuma with someone else to come and ask me if I could write a letter in a newspaper that he had already agreed with to bring this character of Buthelezi to the fore in a very sort of subtle manner, but to say, you are bigger than being just in the province of KwaZulu-Natal. I think you should try and look into the future of South Africa in that manner. And of course, at the time, not being a member of this movement or not being a political person, we went to and fro, and in the end, I accepted that I will do the letter. But then he wanted the ideas to be his, but I must put them in my language, which was not bad enough because I thought I could write English a little bit better than him. So, so I prepared this draft. He looked at it, he didn't like it, and then I had to prepare another draft. In the end, he liked the draft, and the letter was published in the Sunday Times. Now, you know that Buthelezi, every time a letter appeared about him, he wrote back to the Times. He would write back to you. And he never did that. Because I also had a relationship with him. that he knew I respected him. I didn't necessarily agree with him, but he knew that I had enormous respect for him. So if you had to, I had to write again Buthelez's legacy. I think people have captured it that he is who he is. We cannot deny what he did, but also neither should we diminish other things that are good that he did. So there were good things and there were terrible things that we did. The problem at the moment is the fact that nobody wants to accept the terrible things he did. And that's what hurts the people who are the victims. You know, if you have been a terror to some people, remember that everybody is talking about this Wuipatong, the East Rand. And nobody has given the people in the East Rand and Wuipatong a platform to speak for themselves. We're talking for them in the way we think, but we've basically shut them down. They don't have a voice in the media to speak. So Buthelezi is who he was. And I think we should just capture it at that and let history judge it that way, rather than try to force everybody to believe in a particular way that he should be, because I think that will not be fair, and that will not bring closure to the people that are hurting at the moment. So that would be my contribution to it. The thing about the lady, I really do think that there is a role that young people should play in this democracy. You know, I often gave the example, you know, when we were young, we had people like Steve Biko, Mampela, Rampela, Panipichana. All these people had a vision or a mission, but what they did was they wrote down things. They wrote down their ideas and their aspirations such that we could contest and debate with them about these ideas. Today, lots of you still read I Write What I Like by Steve Biko. I've yet to see a youth leader today who has written his ideas rather than complain about that which is not there. So I would urge that as young leaders, as part of your protest, I think you should put some of these thoughts down so that they can be aired properly and they can be on record and they can be debated upon. It doesn't help to have thoughts and you don't put them down. I have put my reflections in this book. I'm sure somebody's going to swear at me. Somebody's going to contest my ideas. But that's how societies develop, and that's how somebody else is going to see something positive out of this. Other people may see something negative. But if I just kept them to myself, who do they serve? No one. So I do believe that there's merit in I don't know if you all understand that. If you have got thoughts and you've got strong thoughts that you think are important for society, you put them down. You fight for them. You die for them. You don't sort of like just have them and they hang around. Nobody knows about them. You only talk about them in the shebeens or in taverns or something like that. I think you have to be able to express yourself, because not everybody will agree with you, but someone may learn something out of your thought and take it further. And that's how societies evolve. And that the person who does that will say, you know, I picked that from Makgoba's book or from Njabulo Ndebele's book or something like that. I learned that from. So we have to try and teach each other. You know, my late father used to say to me that if you are a teacher, you don't keep knowledge to yourself. Otherwise, you're not a teacher. You're supposed to share your knowledge with other people. Of course, they don't have to agree with you, but at least they are able to evaluate how you understand that knowledge. So it's very, very important. I don't know whether I've answered the other guy.
Yeah, I think the last two were related.
They were very, yeah. But I think young leaders must write. As I say, since Steve Biko, I haven't seen a book produced by a young political leader in South Africa, including Malema.
One last one. I see a hand here. Oh, yeah, please. The more women, the better.
Okay, morning, Prof.
Morning.
Nice seeing you again. Prof, I just want to pick your brain. What is your thought about the report of the public protector vindicating the president about the Phala issue?
Thank you. Knowledge is power. Knowledge
Prof,
is power.
welcome. I didn't see you were here.
Knowledge is power, and the written word will outlive you. Mine is just a comment. I cannot engage the professor. But a good question from a student who mentioned the name Julius Malema. For me, I would want you to take this with you. Whenever we talk to the exclusion of other racial groups. It is about us blacks. Whenever positions are advertised today, I don't see whites, Indians, and sometimes colors applying for those positions. Now I'm saying the society we envision, the one we want to build, can we really succeed to the exclusion of others? For me, that is just food for thought. Lastly, we tend to think, assume, and project ourselves as the only people who have been under slavery, under apartheid, or under colonialism. Many countries are not beholden to the past. They are here going forward. We are not going to succeed or win as a nation as long as we are beholden to the past. I repeat, you were not the first to be colonized, to live under slavery, or to live under apartheid. Even the Indians, India, where it is today, up there, Singapore, the so-called Asian tigers, went through what we went through. Maybe he might want to comment, but I prefer him not. He's here for you, not for me.
That's Professor Lisiwatev.
Greetings, everyone. I go by the name of Sipesihle Mashele from Soshanguve. Prof, as a leader or someone who is exposed to leadership and is able to express transparency, do you think our country lacks the leadership qualities of good governance, mainly the principle and core value of transparency?
Well, I think the examples are plenty for you to make that conclusion. So I don't differ with you. We don't have leadership. We have a crisis of leadership, and many people have expressed that. We have rampant corruption going on. We have the worst gender-based violence carrying on. I mean, you name it, the economy is not growing for the past donkey years. And we have many systems in the country, road infrastructure, rail infrastructure. Right now we're facing a water crisis, just like we're facing an electricity crisis. So we do have a serious problem. It is our problem. I think we have to embrace it and try to resolve it. As far as Lisiwa's comments, all I want to say is that when a philosopher speaks, you don't respond. And finally, to Ms. Gwenya, you know, I was the public protector of health. It would be unethical for me to comment on Galeka's report on Palapala. It's not my place to comment on that. There are people who can do it, but not myself.
I want us to wrap up. We have to stop by 12, and we are left only with 5 minutes. So I will really take only one question, and then we wrap up the program. I thought I saw a hand this side.
Yes, Prof. Yeah. Good afternoon, Prof, colleagues. My name is Narimateja. I come from a division called Sayed. I wanted to ask a question around the expropriation of land without compensation, but I will abandon that question and ask, since you are the former Vice Chancellor in the University in Natal, there is a brouhaha that is being caused by the media resulting from the report of the independent assessor at the University of South Africa around the VCs and the curtains and all that. And such a report even recommends that the universities there should be put under administration. What is your assessment or your thoughts, primarily on the question of institutional autonomy, maybe depicting from the report of Professor Musia there? Can I just put you on the spot in relation to that? Thank you.
Okay, let me first of all declare that I do comment on Dr. Bladen Zimande in the book. And I comment on him in the following. Throughout my tenure as Vice Chancellor, I interacted a lot with Bladen Zimande as Minister. One of the things that I can tell you, he doesn't interfere with university autonomy. He respects that and he protects that with all the Vice Chancellors. And I say this because students and workers and academics would write to the president or even would write to him. And he would write back to say to the complainants, I think, exhaust the internal university processes which would involve, I think, respecting university autonomy. I think that is the first thing I want to lay down as a framework. Now, clearly, there are many things that happens at university, at institutions of higher learning. Some of them involve corruption. Some of them involve scandals around degrees, the acquisition of degrees, or so forth. I know that when I was Vice Chancellor, I had to remove a number of degrees. The famous one being a degree where somebody went to Lithuania in the former Soviet Union and found a manuscript in the library in the capital city of Lithuania, took it and got a Russian who spoke English to translate it to get a PhD at my university. He didn't do any work. But when we removed the degree, he pleaded his case on the basis that he was part of the struggle. So you have to deal with this kind of stuff like that. So I understand Themba Musia's investigation. He was appointed to do that. He did that. He has made findings. He has made recommendations, and the minister is applying his mind, and let's respect the route that way. That is how we deal with accountability at every level. If there is nothing to fear, you undergo the process. Of course, if you are hiding other things, then I think you will have these debates that we have here. But universities need to be accountable to society, and the minister is appointed to deal with that when there has been a report that has been produced. He has to act on it. But I can assure you that I know Mr. Nzimande, or Dr. Nzimande, respects university autonomy. And he himself has been an academic and a defender of university autonomy. Now, just before I have no opportunity to speak, I want to thank maybe two people that I haven't mentioned. Mr. Mutobi, or Dr. Mutobi, is here. He is the publisher of Scotterville, the people who have published this book. He is obviously somebody I should thank a lot about. And I really am indebted to him for now and into the future, because this will be on record for the rest of my life, and even when I'm not here. But maybe more importantly, I want to thank Nakedi, with whom I've debated a number of issues here that are in this book. And she has always been very, I would say, objectively critical. And she has a much softer side than I do have. And I think she balances the rough, dry scientific person that I am. And I appreciate that a lot. So I want to thank her, so that this journey that I've traveled, I think she has been part of it, and she knows a lot about it. I'm sure she knows the originals of what I wrote, and maybe the final that has come out as part of her contribution. So, yeah, the book is much softer than what I wrote.
You call this soft, Prof. If this is soft, then it must have been very, very hard. Dr. Mugwadze is himself an author of several very interesting books. So only right that he takes the podium.
Are you ready? Were you listening? Are you Raf Diamonds? Well, Professor Makgoba has raised a question. You are aware that Frantz Fanon has said every generation must. Can you complete the phrase? Must do what?
Fulfill.
So you are that generation, right? And you've been asked the question, are you ready to be part of the leadership? Are you ready to write your thoughts? If you are ready, you may win this prize. If you answer 4 questions. The writer said he took him how many years to write? No. You'll answer one at a time. He said leadership is mentioned how many times? He said transformation is mentioned how many times? And he said cabinet is mentioned how many times? Excuse me, were you listening or you watching? Were you actively listening? If you did, then you know all the 4 answers. Not some, all. He said you can't be half pregnant, didn't he? You can't be half ill. You are either ill or you are well. Do you have all the 4 answers? After you, Vice Chief.
Anyone with all the 4 answers? She has. Papama.
If you don't dare, you won't know. Okay, may you rise? No? The stage is yours.
Oh, wow. Well, it's not the exact number, but it took him 29 years to write the book, right?
No.
Well, let me just take my short on the leadership. It's not the exact number, but it is 400 and something. And transformation, 300 and something. And cabinet, 200 and something.
Are we half free or we are not? So you have the answers. Please, this book awaits a winner. This book awaits.
Shall I just give it to someone I look at and I like? Because the answers are not forthcoming. It looks like the answers are not forthcoming. I think we will give it to one of the ladies who asked the questions there. The one who will reach here first. The one who will reach me first will get it. Papama?
Thank you so much. I missed on an opportunity to win myself a book. Now, I think 10 people from the audience have an opportunity to win a book. But this time it's going to be made easier because it's through a raffle, right? Yes. It's a very fair process. I'm sure when you got in, when you entered the venue, you did put in your name, right? If you didn't, it's a bit late. Well, the first book will go to Tshepo Nkosi.
Tangeli can help you with that while you proceed.
And Kabelo Nicole Mahlama will take the second one.
Are these not your friends?
No, no, not even. Tebogo Makgoba. Oh.
This is cooked. This is cooked.
No, not even, Prof. Let me try again, right? There. No, Nari. Nari Machecha.
Really? I smell the makings of a mafia syndicate.
Who's that?
These friends who are getting the books.
Mohale Palisa. Five to go. Tricia Madonzela. Portia Songwane. Noguphiwa Kunene. La Ketwala.
Like is gone.
And the last one. Samuel Msiza. And that's it, a round of applause to all those who won. I'd like now to invite Dr. Vatiswa Papu Zamkaka, the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research, Innovation and Engagement, for the closing remarks. A round of applause, please.
Thank you, Program Director. Sure, I'm standing on the shoulders of the giants today. Prof. Makgoba, I really feel so much humbled. Let me start there. To our Vice Chancellor and the Principal, Professor Tinyiko Maluleke, of course, the former Health Ombuds of South Africa and the former Vice Chancellor of the University of KwaZulu-Natal, Professor Malegapuru, Makgoba, the TUT council members who are in our midst, TUT colleagues, TUT executives, TUT students, and our distinguished guests, Sanibonani, Dumelang, Molweni Betun. How? Your greeting is so low. Abshen. Yeah. Good morning. Goeiemorgen. Our colleagues, after we've been taught so much about ensuring that we are racially correct in whatever that we do, is it only me who took that lesson today? Colleagues, it really gives us a great pleasure as the People's University to be hosting the recipient of the Order of Makgoba in silver, a renowned academic pioneer in the field of science and medicine, and a leader whose work has contributed to the building of democracy in our country. That is none other than Professor William Makgoba. Leadership for Transformation since the dawn of South Africa's democracy, an insider's view. Perhaps it is important to highlight the words an insider's view. Having served this beloved country under 4 presidents and 25 ministers, having held leadership positions in academia and business, Prof. Makgoba is truly an ideal insider to provide us with insight on South Africa's leadership. On South Africa's leadership transformation since 1994, and from his book, he has perfectly articulated the imperatives. Anecdote. Prof. Makgoba's book provides comprehensive teaching of leadership, and most importantly, how leadership in South Africa has played a crucial role in addressing the past and shaping the future of the country. Prof. Makgoba, as we grapple with addressing socioeconomic trials, such as high unemployment rate, poverty, social inequality, and inadequate public service access in our country, it is unquestionable that the important insights and reflections from a leader who has occupied a diversity of roles in academia and business are crucial in finding solutions for future complex challenges. We are truly honored, therefore. From reading the book, one could tell that it was written with a great deal of compassion, compatriotism, and with the best interest of the country at heart. It is for this reason, Prof. Makgoba, that the book is appreciated as the TUT's Vice Chancellor's Book of the month of September 2023. Prof. Makgoba, as a university of technology that aims at producing future-ready graduates who can make a positive societal impact, the lessons that are drawn from your book undoubtedly assist us in improving and solidifying our understanding of leadership during transformation and how we can circumnavigate the future. As we observed the discussions unfolding, ladies and gentlemen, between our very own Vice-Chancellor and the Principal, Prof. Maluleke, and Prof. Makgoba, on the book today, I am reminded, Prof. Makgoba, of a quote from our former President, Dr. Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, that I open quote, "A real leader uses every issue, no matter how serious and sensitive, to ensure that at the end of the debate, we should emerge stronger and more united than ever before," close quote. From your leadership anecdotes, we are inspired to confront and interrogate our leadership trends going into the future. May I repeat that? From your leadership, Prof, we are inspired today to confront and interrogate our leadership trends going into the future, and we mean it. Quoting from Prof. Makgoba's book, I open quote, "We glorify corruption and corrupt leadership and tolerate mediocrity in leadership. We normalize behavior of incompetence that would be unacceptable in many other societies," close quote. Is our leadership effective in addressing societal challenges? These are some of the questions that ascend subsequent to reading your book. Prof. Makgoba, once again, as a university of technology that aims to produce future-ready graduates, the lessons drawn from your book undoubtedly assist us in improving and solidifying our understanding of leadership. On behalf of the entire Tshwane University of Technology community, we would like to express our heartfelt gratefulness to you for sharing the great lessons, experiences through your book, which is Leadership for Transformation Since the Dawn of South Africa's Democracy and Insider's View. Your book perfectly aligns to the words of Dalai Lama. I open quote, "Share your knowledge is a way to achieve immorality," close quote. Thank you for sharing the knowledge with us today. The leadership of the university commit, VC, on your behalf, to ensure that this book will be made available to us as a TUT community. I thought, VC, you would note. I thought you would note as a sign of agreement, lest I'm in trouble after this. Thank you once again, Prof. Makgoba, for the thought-provoking book and making time to talk to us about it. I would like to also express gratitude to all the attendees, even those who are online, and organizers of this event. I thank you, and sitikuni nonke mazene thole.
Thank you very much, colleagues, and thank you for attending this prestigious occasion. Do have some, I believe there's some tea or something outside. If there isn't, it is because of the austerity measures. But I think there will be tea. Do you want to say anything, Papama?
You said, Prof,
Okay.
that there will be tea, definitely. Yeah.
All right.
So for the external guests, we'll just go around the boardroom, and the TUT community can remain behind. And then catering will take place right here.
Okay, you'll show them where to go.
Of course.
And when and where am I taking the photo that will make me famous, standing next to Prof. Makgoba?
Machelana is waiting to direct you out.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. I think after I and the DVC and others have taken photos, the book winners may want to take a photo with him also.
Of course, yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Prof,
so
thank you
much.
so much.